It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all. So in 2015, I got unexpectedly ill. In a rather dramatic turn of events, I ended up in the emergency room and had what would be considered, at a minimum, a near-death experience. That could probably be added to the list of many instances where I've defied expectations of those around me. But it certainly wasn't the first, and it wouldn't be the last time. I came out of that with a sense of urgency around my purpose, my life's work, and the value that I felt I could bring to my community. Don't get me wrong, it's not like a light went off illuminating a bright billboard with an arrow pointing towards my new purpose and direction. Quite the contrary, that experience launched me onto a 4-year journey of what felt like blindly searching for something that I couldn't quite articulate, but felt sure was out there. I had no idea at the time that things would culminate in my taking on a completely new, unexpected direction that would dramatically transform my life. I also could never have anticipated the courage that it would take for me to actually make the decision to pursue that path. Up until that point, my education and my career had been a pretty meticulously mapped out plan. As a child, it had been ingrained in me that education was a requirement. I bought into that notion completely. I assessed what the mainstream identified as the right institutions, and I created the plan to get there. What I couldn't have possibly accounted for was the ever elusive nature of the American dream. That there are obstacles that exist that students that look like me, that look like us, have to overcome to be in those spaces. The courage that it takes to persist, persevere, and succeed in spaces that weren't built for us and don't welcome us with open arms. I was successful, but as I moved up in my academic career, I also moved out to increasingly elite academic institutions. In those spaces, fewer and fewer students looked like me or shared my socioeconomic background or culture. Initially, I was plagued by a sense of having gotten over que me colé, that I had somehow gotten past the filter that was supposed to screen me out, and that I might be found out any moment as the imposter that I thought I must be. But there was also a nagging voice in the back of my mind that was determined to defy those expectations, to push past the boundaries of limitations that others would impose. I didn't like feeling like others could define me, much less that might impact my own thinking about myself. So I pushed, determined to prove my worthiness. I had no idea how my educational experiences would continue to play out throughout my professional career. I didn't realize then, as I do now, that having the courage to stand my ground in those spaces was something that was ultimately going to serve as the foundation for my life, as a woman of color, as a single mother, as an executive, and ultimately as the first Afro-Latina candidate for New York City mayor. So several years after that experience in the emergency room, I was becoming increasingly frustrated with my ongoing search for clarity of this purpose around this new direction that my life was supposed to be moving in. I'd even started questioning whether I just made the whole thing up as a result of the trauma of experiencing near death. But two things that would happen within a relatively short time served as yet another wake-up call, and also really tested my courage and conviction to pursue change. I was in the middle of almost a decade as the CEO of an anti-poverty organization in the South Bronx, providing services in the poorest congressional district in the country. I was pretty happy in my role. We were serving over 10,000 families a year successfully, helping them gain access to academic opportunity and economic growth. And I'd also finally established some economic stability for myself as a single mom of 2 children who were both approaching college age. So I was doing good work for my community, and I was making a decent living while I was at it. And yet one summer afternoon, I found myself preparing to enter a conference room with board members. As I ran through the presentation in my head, I caught myself calculating how I would frame certain proposals or responses that I had to report on. I was doing this in the context of how not to sound too arrogant, how not to sound too forceful, how not to appear too pushy, demanding, or uppity. I was literally mentally contorting myself and constricting myself, my Black Latina identity, my womanhood, my politics, so that I could be more palatable to the room. Each contortion required that I check some part of me at the door in order to make the white people in the room more comfortable with my existence, my power, and my perspective. I felt like I was making myself smaller, and I was suddenly acutely aware of my inability to be my full self in that space. I knew at that moment that my time in that role was done, though I still had no real idea what that meant or where I would go. I no longer wanted to make myself small to make others feel more comfortable. I was resolved, and I was terrified. For the first time in my life, it struck me that I didn't really know what came next. I'd spent so much time measuring and calculating what I needed to do in order to be successful according to other people's standards. I just didn't know. After decades of building and doing this work, what was I going to do next? But I took a deep breath of appreciation for that truth, and even for the fear that came with it, and I stepped into the conference room. Later that summer, I sat on the beach with some of my closest friends and family. As we were, eating our sandy sandwiches, the topic that many of them had raised for years resurfaced. Dianne, you really should think about running for office. For the past 10 years, this question or suggestion or demand had been brought up every so often by friends, family, colleagues. Sometimes strangers even would tilt their head, squint a little, smile, and say, "You should run for office." And to this, I would always reply sternly but politely, "No, thank you." It wasn't that I didn't believe in the power of people to enact systems change. I simply didn't see myself as a politician. I was more a power to the people person, and politics just wasn't it for me. After much chiding and ribbing, though, from my friends that day, I reluctantly relented to exploring the idea. What I didn't fully realize at the time was that part of my reluctance was rooted in fear. Politicians didn't look like me. They don't come from places or families like mine, and they don't have lived experiences like mine. The flip side of that is I'm not a traditional candidate. I don't have years of experience in political office, and I don't have a war chest that I've been accumulating as I move from one office to the other. So there's no room in the narrative for someone like me, right? But what if I was tired of tinkering around the edges in trying to bring change to Black and Brown communities just so that they could have access to education and economic opportunity, access to justice? What if I was tired of operating on the assumption that elected officials actually aren't going to put our community's interests first? What if I was tired of having such low expectations of our leaders that I didn't expect them to get much done, much less for those who needed it most? And what if I was tired of feeling like my voice didn't matter? Maybe my acceptance of the political system as something that was for others fed into its self-perpetuating cycle. Maybe my acceptance of the notion that City Hall would remain largely white, largely male, and largely inept was part of the self-fulfilling prophecy. What would it look like for me to claim space, yet again, that others weren't offering or inviting people like me into? Would it be possible for me to create my own narrative, becoming viable as a candidate for New York City mayor? Could I claim that I've been working to strengthen communities for 30 years, preparing young people for careers, increasing access to higher education, establishing housing to support families when they could no longer afford the rent? Could I claim that I've been a successful CEO of several multi-million-dollar organizations with hundreds of staff? Could I claim that I've been a single mom raising 2 kids in New York City, providing for them financially, navigating their education, and running a household? Or could I claim that as a first-generation college graduate Boricua from Bed-Stuy, I'm not just a warrior, but I'm a survivor? They say that courage is experiencing fear and doing it anyway. If that's the case, then I feel like I can safely say without any humility whatsoever that I am one courageous badass. New York City has never had a Latina candidate for mayor. We've never even had a Latinx elected to citywide office. I believe that the voices of those who've been traditionally discounted matter, and I'm betting on my viability being determined by those people. So my call to you is that you too step in to claim the space that we deserve in places where we're not traditionally invited or welcome, and that we make sure our communities can be represented everywhere. Soy DIANNE Morales, and I am a candidate for New York City Mayor.